In the face of death, Jesus said these words, "Let not your hearts be troubled. Trust in God, trust also in me. In my Father's house there are many rooms. I go to prepare a place for you, and when I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also." Hear also these words describing the nature of God and the nature of life. From 1 John 4, "Love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love." We gather this day to give thanks to God for the life of Emily, Virginia, Hart, Scott. Each part of that name has significant meaning. We come together in grief. Death is always hard. Death always hits in a way that we never quite are prepared for. No longer can we go to Virginia, be with her, talk with her, laugh with her, cry with her. There's a separation that death brings that human beings have always struggled with. So what we are doing is what human beings have done from the beginning of time in the face of death. We're gathering together. It's important that we're here today. Your presence is a part of this service. It's especially important to gather for those family that feel that loss most acutely, to be able to support them and love them and be there for them. It's good that we're here for that. But that's not the only reason we're here. We're here to put it all in context, to remind ourselves that God didn't create us for 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, even 100 years, but created us for eternity. Gave us an eternal soul. And sent his Son, Jesus, into the world that we might live our lives understanding that context. And that context allows us to see Virginia's life with us as a small part of something much larger and much grander. And that gives us hope. And hope is so powerful in the face of death. With that hope, we are not only able to remember her this day, but truly to celebrate, even to laugh with joy as we think of her life. And so, there's one other thing that's just important to know as we gather, and that is that we all grieve a little differently. That's right. And part of what makes a service work is that everyone allows the grace and the room for each and every one of us to grieve as we need to grieve. So provide that grace, that space for each and every one of us. Will you join me in prayer? Almighty God, our Father, from whom we come and to whom our spirits return, grant us your blessing in this hour as we come to remember and grieve, but also to celebrate Virginia's life. In the face of death, we especially look to you. May your presence be felt by all who gather this day. Through this time, today, here, now, we seek to make space for you to come, O Lord. Allow this to become holy ground and holy time, that we might grieve deeply, love fiercely, and look to you and one another for the grace and the hope that we so desperately need. This we pray to you, our triune God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Our opening hymn is In the Garden. The words are on the screen. We'll remain seated.
if you find me looking to the left more than the right, I don't have vertigo or anything. But that's where Virginia sat. So no offense. That's where she sat. I want to continue this time of remembering and celebrating with a prayer of faith. It's responsive, and I hope it expresses something that lives inside of us. The bold print is the response, please. We believe beyond absence that beyond the pain, that beyond the brokenness, that beyond the hurting, that beyond the silence,
there is the word.
That beyond the word,
There is understanding.
And through understanding, there is love. Let us join together in the Lord's Prayer, please. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Hear these words from the scriptures, 3 verses that had deep meaning to Virginia. From Matthew 19, verse 14. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me. Do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these." And from Matthew 22. Jesus said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." And from John 15, Jesus said, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." So ends the reading of the word.
A measure of confession. Until I was sitting in Norm's room with his siblings and some of the spouses, I had no idea Virginia was not her first name. Now, I did hear Ed Kinniston. I never heard Ed Kinniston call her Virginia. He called her Evie. And I'm imagining, if you're an Evie person, raise your hand if you're an Evie person. All right, would the Virginias raise their hand? Now would the Karens raise their hand? That was a trick question. That's not funny. Maybe a little bit. Most of us weren't around. Oh. Dot here. You weren't even around. Not on Wednesday, August 26, 1936, anyway. You came around a little bit later, young lady. Well, if on that date, if you happened to be at Sutter Memorial Hospital in the company of Dorothy, better known as Dolly, and Frank Hart Jr., then you would have been there when Emily Virginia made her appearance. She was greeted by Carol, her 6-year-old sister, and eventually this generation of the Hart family would be completed with the arrival of Dorothy, a.k.a. Dot, who is here with us today. Virginia spent the first 2 years of her life living in Sacramento before relocating to Los Angeles with her father's job, where her father's job with the state took them down. And she was there till she was about 10 years old when the Hart family returned to the place it all started up here in Sacramento. Where'd she grow up? I am so glad you asked. She grew up in the Land Park area near the Tower Theater, and life was pretty darn good. Her mother was a stay-at-home mom back in the day when that was the norm. That's how households worked. And her father climbed the ladder working for the state, ending up as the director of the State Department of Rehabilitation. Virginia's older sister struggled with some mental health issues starting in her adolescence, which always impacts the whole of a family. Perhaps this is when Virginia found a way to focus on the positive, or maybe she was just wired that way. Because speaking ill of others, including her sister, or focusing on the downside or the negative, was just not her style. Virginia shared with some of the kids, some of her children, stories of her growing up. One of them involves a pivotal moment in the 20th century. This date may ring a bell with some of you. On December 7th, 1941, Virginia's mom shuttled the kids out the front door, into the front yard, and locked the door. And stayed inside for a good long while. I think looking back at that particular date and the fact that she remembered the date tells me that her mom was probably absorbing something and watching and hearing. Actually, probably wasn't on TV. It was probably listening on the radio about what was happening about half an ocean away. There may have been one other door-locking moment which stuck in Virginia's mind, and we have nobody who actually documented this. I went and tried to find it on Twitter, and I looked for the video on YouTube, but I was not able to find it. And that was when she was a little girl. She fell, and she fell, hurt one arm, is busy knocking on the front door with the other arm, and nothing happened. The door didn't open. Eventually, Mom opened the door. They went to the doctor, and guess what? That arm was broken. She mentioned a huge source of pride for her. One of the things that Virginia celebrated is when she earned the high honor of being the queen of her Job's Daughter chapter. That's something that meant a lot to her. She worked her way through school, graduating from McClatchy High as part of the class of '54. While in high school, she faithfully attended First UMC at 21st and J Street. It's still there, where she did what all the good kids did. If you went to a Methodist church and you were a good kid, you went to something called MYF. It's not Mighty Youth Fine, it's Methodist Youth Fellowship. And she was a faithful member of that. She remembers that at the age of 15, there was this 17-year-old guy there. Now, he had a car. He had slicked back black hair. And he was the church's version of James Dean. Now, if you don't know who James Dean is, look to your left and right, find somebody smiling and nodding, and ask them who James Dean was. There was enough laughter that shouldn't be too tough. Yeah, like I said, the James Dean reference will be lost on some of you, but you can work your way through that, or you can Google it right now if you want. So you read a little bit about James Dean, and you'll know something about young Donald Scott, the boy who caught Virginia's eye, and vice versa, clearly. Clearly, what was born in that youth group was not a passing thing, as 18-year-old Virginia and then 20-year-old Donald tied the knot at that very same church on December 10th, 1954. She was married in a dress that her mother made. Those first 5 years in the Scott household were a whirlwind of activity, to say the least. Young people, this is a history lesson, not a description of current events. By the time she was married for 5 years, she had 4 children. Now, if that doesn't strike some fear into you somewhere, you have issues. 4 children in 5 years. I'm impressed. Norm led the parade of the Scott children, followed by Doug the impulsive, Kathy the mother junior, and Sue the quiet. Sue's still pretty quiet. Talk about having your hands and arms full. Virginia had both of those full. For Virginia, family was the end-all, be-all. Perhaps you've encountered someone who loved doing something, yet they weren't the least bit good at it. Well, that's not the case with Virginia. She was a great mom. I have that on good authority 4 times over. Yes? Yes. Okay. Well, she was great with people and wouldn't think of yelling at a person or giving them what for. I am told that the pots and pans in her kitchen did not enjoy the same protection. So while she would not yell at a person or scream at a person or maybe bat around, the pots and pans suffered a different fate. Yeah. With 4 kids, 10 and under, she was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which was incredibly painful and even resulted in a hospitalization. And that RA and fibromyalgia would be her constant companions for the rest of her 85 years. You know, I knew she had trouble walking, and I knew she was uncomfortable, but I can count on the number of marathons I've run, the number of times she ever complained about how she felt. By the way, the sticker, if I had one on the window of my car, would be 0.0. Yeah, I was surprised to learn that because it wasn't something she ever brought up. It was not something she ever complained about. Per the 4 who knew her best in this season of life, Virginia loved being a stay-at-home mom. And even with all the challenges that came her way, it was never why me. It was never how come. It was never what am I going to do. It was just live life. Loving being a stay-at-home mom didn't mean hitting the drive-thru at McDonald's. Now, if you love your kids, you take them to McDonald's. Back in the day, well, there's a mother over there who says, not in my house. Yeah, back in Virginia's world and in her day, being a stay-at-home mom and loving your family meant there were 3 meals on the table. It means when you got up in the morning and were ready to go to school, breakfast was on the table and your lunch was packed. That's what it meant to her, and that's one of the ways that I have to believe she said, I love you. I have to believe that was one of her love languages. I'm told that this carried on to the next generation as her grandchildren enjoyed the same blessing of when they stayed at the house, their breakfast was there to greet them when they eventually got up. Virginia did motherhood very different than her own mom. Oh, did I mention that she loved kids? Yeah, because she loved kids. Yeah, the kids did some unfiltered sharing. Doug shared that when he was 18 and he was home, his mom would still ask him whether he wanted French toast or cereal for breakfast. And I'm told that there's such a thing as grandma eggs and grandma toast. If you've eaten grandma eggs or grandma toast, okay, got to be kin. That sounds like a kin meal. Those were things at the Scott home. And speaking of breakfast, Norm wanted me to know that at least one day a week when his dad was at work as a home improvement salesperson at Montgomery Wards, did he work the Montgomery Wards, not the one on Florin Road? The one on Florin Road? My wife's in back. That was our first credit card when we got married in 1974 in Montgomery Wards, and that's where we bought our first freezer. Boom. Probably not from your dad. No. Okay. Anyway, on a morning when Dad was at work, they would go over to Grandma's house. And they would go over to Grandma's house for a special tradition, and that was deluxe breakfast. You know, that's like the muffin with the eggs, the cheese, and the sausage. No, that was breakfast food or cereal. It really was cereal. That was deluxe breakfast. Was it like sweet cereal or something like that, or just cereal? Okay, breakfast for dinner. All right. Kathy seemed to have a memory of eating a lot of hot dogs as a child growing up. Are we still a hot dog eater, or we're done with that? No tuna either? Nuh-uh, we don't do tuna now. Okay. You want to know what to get her? Don't put a tuna casserole on her porch. Yeah. And I may have heard and learned more about goldenrod eggs than ever sitting in a living room with a family before. While she was not a Michelin star cook, Virginia's family was always fed. Nobody was hungry, and the food was good. There were 3 homemade meals on the table. That was a fact of life at the Scott house. Donald Scott, his work as a salesman was challenging in that everyone wants their home improvements done in the summer. So life was good in the summer, and pay was good. On the flip side, not so many people want their roofs taken off in the middle of winter in Sacramento. It used to rain in Sacramento in the winter, back when she was a child, when Virginia was a child. So things kind of slowed down in the winter, and the tempo in the house changed just a little bit. There were family vacations to Tahoe that were often camping trips for the family. It seemed like Virginia was very much in love with camping and all that went with that. And Donald had a little preference for lights and machines that make noise and take money and spit out money. There was a West Coast trip with stops in California, Oregon, and Washington, a memorable vacation at Diamond Lake. And there was a Canada trip that was nothing but a treasure. Camping and staying with relatives was the norm for the family growing up, and the opportunity to spend a night in a motel or a hotel was prime time. That was a gift. That was a treat. Life was good until 1983, when Virginia lost her husband and the kids lost their dad. She did a little bit of work outside the house after that, but mostly her disabilities kept her from doing much more than that, and she continued to maintain things at home. Church was, through the entirety of her life, central, not only to her youthful life, but to her adult life. From her many years at First UMC, like I said, on the corner of 21st and J Street, many more years at Florin UMC, time that she shared with Ted and Elner Price, among others. And she loved Pastor Don Wells there, and Janine, who was his wife, was like a second mother to Virginia. On to Elk Grove United Methodist Church, where Norm and Mary and their family called their church home for a season. And then her final church home was little church out in the middle of nowhere. And we have to blame the Kinnistons for that. We'll blame Ed and Lila for that, for loving her so much that they ensured that she made her way out here when she couldn't make it out here herself. It was 2006 when she stood up and walked in front of this congregation and said, I want this to be my church home and my church family. So props to Ed and Lila, who just happened to be Norm's in-laws, if you don't know. So it was kind of close-knit family, for seeing that she was able to get out here. This is a place no one comes for accident. You didn't come here by accident today. No one else has ever come here by accident looking for Mervyns. And, oh wait, there is no Mervyns anymore. But yeah, like I said, nobody's ever come here by an accident. Everybody who comes to this church is either a friend send or a God send or both. Can't possibly talk about her with any kind of detail without some words about her beloved canine companions. Doug, your words, not mine. Mom loved our dogs, and maybe she even loved our dogs best. First question, how are the dogs? Not how are the kids, how are you? How are the dogs? And she said that about all dogs, though, to be perfectly honest, not just his. The list of dogs that called Virginia's home their home is long and glorious. But Doug, how come Major was her German Shepherd and the German Shepherd that you gave us was called Sarge? She got an officer, we got enlisted. Thanks. I just realized that as I'm looking at that. Yeah, so German Shepherd, there was a lab mutt that looked like the Flying Nun with the ears that go out and then come down. You don't want to get it in the wind. That was Brady. Danny the Golden Retriever. Danny was stolen on a 4th of July. That was well remembered. Lucy, a Basset Hound. Sammy the Cocker Spaniel. And last but not least, Sally, a King Charles Cavalier. 2013. A year that marked another great challenge and change of life for Virginia, when she fell and dementia reared its head as a final set of challenges. Over the course of living with Alzheimer's, though, and the dementia, there was, wrapped up in that, a beautiful blessing. Those protective layers that served her so well, that protected her in spite of everything that went on around her and to her, they fell away. And the kids got to know their mom in a way that was, if we were going to try to describe it, if I'm going to describe it, I'd describe it as unplugged. No pretense, just straight from the heart, straight from the mind. What a gift in the midst of a terrible challenge. Seems Virginia's ability to find the good and the light in the midst of all that goes on, passed on to her children. Norm was reminded during this season, and I quote, "I had the best childhood." Some final thoughts from her children. Dad was not overly demonstrative or demonstrative with affection. Mom was June Cleaver. Who doesn't know who June Cleaver is? I'm going to look at you, okay, find an old person. I was going to say an old something else, but I'm going to say old person. Ask them who June Cleaver was, and we'll leave it to Beaver to answer it. Boo? Boo, booed by the family. Yeah, there was a little study in contrast in the family house. Dad was a spender. Mom was a saver. But it worked out, and they found their way through it. Both Mom and Dad loved Christmas, always decorated the most in the neighborhood. Christmas was a huge deal in the Scott family, and what they had done is, evidently, James Dean had salvaged from Montgomery Wards after they had their Christmas decoration set up. They had a revolving stand that you could put your Christmas tree on. They were going to get rid of it. And you know what he did? He saved it. And so they had a fancy Christmas tree on a revolving platform. Most of that's from Norm. Doug. Over the course of his childhood, Doug may have broken his brother's arm. He may have accidentally shot a BB through their minister's window. He may have thrown a rock through a neighbor's slider in their brand new house. Now, if I had done any of those or all those things, I would find a place to hide. What did Doug do? He ran straight to his mom and told her what happened. Why? Because he wasn't afraid. That doesn't mean nothing happened. He did have to go back and apologize, after which his mom asked him, "Did you learn anything?" Kathy may have stolen a pack of gum at age 5. May have. Once again, I went through the arrest records. I could not find a police report. Yeah, you're safe. So she may have stolen a pack of gum at age 5 and was asked when she got home and that gum was visualized by her mom, "Where did you get that gum?" Getting the answer, what did Virginia do? Drove Kathy straight back to the store, made her give it back, and tell the person what she'd done. Another example of always loving and being kind and not having a punitive soul. Sue may have mentioned about a lady who saw the uniqueness in each child and encouraged them to be special the way they were created to be special, and accepting them as they were so they could become nothing less than what they were created to be. You know, looking back at what you guys shared with me, I realize how much I didn't know about your mom. Heck, I didn't even know her whole name. At its core, this eulogy is a word picture and a tribute to Virginia's character. It's the life story of a lady who wouldn't think of spending the money to go to a dentist for herself, but made sure that her kids were at the dentist every year and got whatever they need done. It's a life story of a lady who gave herself fully to family, whose 4 children all graduated from college. It's a story of a lady who was close to her in-laws, who loved family reunions, was fully committed to tops. Take off pounds sensibly, not the kind you spin. Who more than anything wanted to be with family and friends. A lady for whom the isolation of the COVID was devastating. And it is a story of a lady who battled weight her entire life, yet who loved ice cream and all things chocolate, and who in the end found great joy in a McDonald's burger and, ooh, the best chocolate shake ever. Your legacy, Virginia, is 4 children who, with help, made you a grandmother to 9. And those grandchildren, with a little help, made you a great-grandmother to 12. Thank you, Lord, for sharing with us this day the life of Virginia. Thank you for the part of her that lives in each of us, whose lives touched hers. Amen.
Is, as Pastor Neil said, painting word pictures of a person's life. Thank you, Neil, for that incredible eulogy. But the eulogizing continues, and members of her family are prepared to share, sometimes themselves, sometimes through another family member, because it's often difficult to be able to express the words at this time, beginning with her firstborn, Norm, through a grandson-in-law. We use this microphone since it's there.
Here are Norm's thoughts about his mom, only a few of which were spoiled by Pastor Neil. It's the perks of going first, right? I was born when my mom was only 18. Of course, I don't remember that, but my earliest memories are of a young woman, my mom, with a house full of kids. After me, Doug, Kathy, and Sue were born, all before I was 5. It may have been a bit crowded and hectic at times, but it was a house full of love and laughter. Mom was the center of our family. She took care of Dad, even when he may not have wanted her to. When she talked to me, I always felt like I had her full attention and was the only child in the house. Everything had to be fair, so when we poured some soda into a glass, the person who didn't pour got to pick a glass first. When we got ready to go off to school, our lunches were neatly lined up on the kitchen counter. She made the neatest sandwiches. When we ate our lunches at school, the bread was always neatly stacked, and the sandwiches were perfectly sliced diagonally across the middle. I remember asking if I could buy lunch once in a while. The answer was usually no, probably because most of the time money was tight. But that was okay, because I secretly knew Mom's lunches were better anyway. When we got home, there were always snacks waiting for us, from cookies or cupcakes when we were young to half gallons of milk when we were teenagers playing sports. She taught us how to make a bed that was perfectly straight and smooth and had corners that were just right. She taught us that the proper way to vacuum is to go back and forth evenly so you leave perfect marks on the carpet. Most importantly, she taught us to do the right thing even when no one was looking. We grew up in a happy household. When I was an adult, Mom asked me, "Did you have a happy childhood?" I could hardly believe she even asked the question, but my answer was easy and honest. I lived the best childhood I could imagine. It wasn't perfect, no one's is, but we grew up in a house full of love and happiness. I believe that has a lot to do with whatever success I've had in my life. Even though she had a happy life, Mom had her challenges. As she had children, she gained weight, and her battle with weight lasted her whole life. She was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis when she was 29, which caused her a lot of pain and limited her ability to work or be more active. She lost my dad when she was only 46, just as it appeared they were finally going to have enough money to do a bit of traveling or buy a new car once in a while. She never got over that loss, and his picture was beside her favorite recliner until the day she died. When Mary and I first started dating, I took Mary to meet Mom and Dad, and Mom and Mary connected almost immediately. She quickly fell in love with Mary just like I did, and I think one of the big reasons for that was she saw how good Mary was for me. As my mom told her later, when it's right, it's right. She welcomed Mary into the family with open arms, and Mary found out that when you marry one of us, you're family. Our kids came along when she was still a young woman. She was only 42 when Heather was born. She didn't complain about being a young grandparent, but instead jumped into her new role with both feet. On the day Heather was born, she and my dad, along with Ed and Lila, carpooled down to Modesto to see her. They weren't going to wait, even for a day. On the night Melissa was born, we were going to bed at my parents' house when Mary's water broke, and as we were going out the door to the hospital, I was threatened with bodily harm if I didn't call, even in the middle of the night, to tell her how Mary and the baby were doing. As more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren came along, she shared her limitless love with each of them. I'll let her grandchildren tell you about what she meant to them, but I've always been keenly aware of how much our children's lives have been enriched by Mom being a part of their lives every day. As you'll hear many times today, she lived for her family, and we are all richer for that experience. Mom's health struggles increased as she got older. Aside from her physical ailments, she was diagnosed with dementia. We knew Mom was getting forgetful and a bit disorganized, but we hoped it wasn't what it turned out to be. As her disease progressed, she reached out more and more to family for comfort and connection, always wanting to know what everyone was doing, even though she wasn't able to participate as much or even remember everyone's names. Some of my best visits with her during the last few years of her life were having lunch in the parking lot at McDonald's on rainy days while we sat in my truck and went over what was happening in the family. Although there's nothing positive about a loved one having dementia, it does give you time to say all the things you want to say and to tell your loved one over and over how much you love them. As I said, I never doubted my mom loved me, and I took advantage of the past few years to tell her I loved her as often as I could. I am grateful for that opportunity. In remembering my mom with Pastor Dave and Pastor Neil a couple of weeks ago, I commented that I thought my mom was Christ-like. I didn't mean that she wore her religion on her sleeve or quoted Bible verses all the time. What I meant was that she walked the walk. She was loving, humble, and supportive. She didn't pity herself when bad things happened to her. She chose to live a happy life. She always served others and loved her family fiercely. She was empathetic to a fault. I remember one day I went to visit her in the hospital. She was in bed connected to a bunch of tubes and wires. After I sat there for a few minutes, she asked if I was okay and whether I needed anything. A pillow, a glass of water, or is it too hot in here? Even in her condition, she was thinking of me. Her empathy and compassion were always something I greatly admired about her. Through most of her life, she was a talker. When you walked into a room, you were probably her best friend within 10 minutes. Later in life, her caretakers often commented how sweet and caring she was. When Mom broke her hip and I told a caretaker that she wouldn't be returning to the Meadows, the caretaker cried and told me they all loved her. I've heard some people say that to experience unconditional love, you should get a dog, but I had something better, my mom. I never doubted for a moment of my life that she loved me, whether I was getting the best grades in school or getting caught by a sheriff's deputy throwing road barricades into the creek. She called me honey even when I was in my 60s, but I didn't mind. She was my mom. I love you, Mom, and I'll miss you.
Hi, my name is Debbie Scott. I know most of you in the room. I'm the wife of Doug Scott, the second born. And I told him I could do this for him, but he just whispered in my ear that if something happened and I couldn't do it, he might come up and try to do it for me. But let's see, I might have a few tears here. Let's see if I can get through this. So Evie was what I always called her. Evie was my mother-in-law for the past 25 years, and like has already been said today, she embraced me immediately as a member of the family and showed me, as everyone has mentioned, unconditional love and acceptance. And one of the things I'd like to mention is that as she embraced me, going into a second marriage, there's a lot of thoughts and feelings and esteem and things that go on for you. And every time I looked in her eyes, I was able to see and love myself because she just reflected that automatically. So I'm eternally grateful that I had her in my life for the past 25 or so years. And in honor of her, I am going to try to read for Doug the words that he's written to describe his mom. So on behalf of Doug, thank you all for being here. Again, these are his words. As I write this, I am expecting her service to be a fairly small crowd due to both her age at death and because she led a pretty simple life. Simple is not a criticism. My mother was not a complicated person. I know now that much of God's beauty lies in simple things. A complicated life does not translate to having more meaning. Her simple life and simple way of being has created great meaning. My mother had a single, all-encompassing purpose in life: to love her family. She was not an avid reader. She was not an intellectual. She was not a community volunteer. She was not a high achiever in most ways society would define. What she was is a great mother. This expanded as she became a wonderful grandmother and great-grandmother. When I was younger, her older sister Carol called her, quote unquote, Earth Mother. I didn't really know what she meant at the time, but it was clear she meant it as a compliment. Now, I believe she meant that my mom was down to earth, kind, loving, and a great mother. Motherhood was her purpose. My mother raised 4 caring, giving adults. She raised a lawyer, a psychologist, a teacher, and a school administrator, HR professional. She raised 4 children that became 4 loving parents, as well as kind, giving people. My mother could not see and could never take any credit for the fact that she touched thousands of lives by launching us 4 into the world. She has a legacy that she could never see. Like George, for some of you, in It's a Wonderful Life, she had a quiet and dramatic impact on the world. My mom and her friends often marveled that she raised 4 kids who graduated from college, who avoided problems with drugs and alcohol, who stayed committed to her and to each other, and who still contribute to the world. Up until the final weeks of her life, she spoke of the blessing that her children were to her, and she was grateful. She still took no credit. In fact, she usually said, I have no idea what I did to be so lucky, and thank God for my children. Those children are now all in their 60s and have had the great benefit of a lifetime with her. We have no idea what we did to deserve her. What our mother did to be so lucky is easy to understand, yet difficult for so many parents. My mother loved us unconditionally. She poured so much love into each of us that we were able to thrive. She was understanding of who each of us was as unique individuals and supported us throughout our lives. Her expectations of us were always in the area of being good people. Doug wanted me to mention that Norm and Doug didn't compare notes. Some similar themes here. She never talked about college or achievements of any kind as an expectation. There was no pressure to be anything, and she supported whatever we wanted to be. She communicated to us that she wanted only one goal, for us to be happy. My mother did not use guilt in parenting. She also did not use fear or punishment as tools to control us, nor did she compare us to one another. We were all special to her, so much so that I believe that every one of us teased her often about being her favorite. Mom liked peace and harmony. Of course, with 4 kids and a husband who worked a lot, she was at times a referee. She loved our father unconditionally. When he was periodically unpredictable in his moods, she would interpret him to us. She supported him always and worked to help us understand him. At some point in my youth, I was complaining about Dad to my mom. She felt I was being unfair and said, "Look, he was here long before any of you were, so if anybody's going to have to leave, it won't be him." This unconditional alignment with him as a co-parent brought me great comfort by keeping me in my rightful place. I understood I was important, but her marriage was the most important thing to her. It was a strong and healthy message. The loss of her husband when she was only 46 was her single greatest life burden. She never could imagine being in another relationship with a man and died with his picture next to her chair. Within her loving beauty as a mother, she was human. She was not the best listener. She could be very anxious, and she smoothed over conflicts and unpleasant memories from her childhood with a poor memory. Like us, she loved her sisters and parents unconditionally. She was a forgiving soul of all those within her circle of love. Even outside of this family circle, she did not speak poorly of others. She was always positive and accepting. I am so sad that my mom is gone. The only way I know how to move through my grief is with gratitude. And so, I am grateful for having an indescribably great mother for nearly 65 years of my life. I am grateful that I left nothing unsaid to her. She moved on, hearing my gratitude. I am grateful for the role model she was. I once told a large group of staff at my work that she was my hero, and then went on to articulate how she set an example for us all to live by. I often used her lessons to me in my leadership roles. I am grateful that my mother always unconditionally accepted me, no matter how big of a mistake I might be making, no matter how much she didn't understand my decisions. She accepted me and helped me to deal with the consequences. She did not judge. She wanted only for me to learn as a child and then to find happiness as an adult through my free will. I am grateful that my mother was always a comfort to me. Although she was not a great listener, just being in her presence always calmed me. This was even true as I sat and watched her gasping for breath. Somehow I felt calmer in her presence. I am grateful that I am strong. I understand that my strength is rooted in her love, and I give her the majority of credit for who I am. I am grateful for having a mother who always made me feel important and worthy of love. In my last moments with my mother, I said, "Hi, Mom, it's me, Doug. I love you, Mom. Thank you for everything you have done for me. Thank you for being such a great mother. I love you, Mom. It's okay now. You can leave. I love you. God loves you. I love you, Mommy." She was unconscious, but as I talked to her and kissed her, she moved her head and furrowed her brow and quietly groaned. I believe she was there for this moment. As I walked away from her for the last time, I was surprised by 2 words that flowed from me to her in my grief. Mommy, and God. I have no memories of calling her Mommy, but somewhere from deep in my soul, the very sad 6-year-old came to say goodbye. I have spent most of my life searching for God. Like many searchers, I have prayed for signs at different times of my life. Please, God, show me you exist. I actually believe that I have been given several concrete signs. When they came, I still struggled with the reality I was seeing. For most of my life, I have found my spiritual connections primarily in nature and in my most loving relationships. God has seemed elusive. But as I walked away from my mother for the last time, I was struck with the irony and the clarity that God had been right next to me for my entire life.
This is what the bottom of my face looks like. My name is Megan. I am one of Virginia's granddaughters and the daughter of Kathy, who is over here somewhere, but I can't look at her for a minute. I'll be reading something that Kathy wrote, and then I'm reading something that I wrote, half reading, half talking if I can look up, but we'll see how we're doing. So I'll start with my mom's, whoever the teacher made sure there was a very clear title that I thought was worth mentioning. She titled it, I Was Blessed. Okay. Graham died, my 2-year-old grandson said. A few days later, my 4-year-old grandson said, who will be your mother now? That was mine, I'm sorry. That's my boy. The innocent questions of young kids, gotta love it. There seemed to be no words to describe the entirety of who my mom was and what she meant to those that were blessed enough to be loved by her. She was the mom who, despite limited resources, provided everything her kids could need. She was the mom who couldn't afford to go to the dentist herself, but made sure her kids did. You guys really like the dentist, that was mentioned before. She somehow managed to get 4 kids off to school every morning with a good breakfast, you like your food too, a lunch of requested items, and homework completed, all without a feeling of chaos and disorganization, a skill I would later marvel at while raising my own kids. She and my dad were somehow able to make their relationship work through good and bad times, and instilled in me the value of a loving marriage to your best friend. She once told me it was, quote, good to marry someone you liked first, and I'm so glad that I did. When my dad died and my mom moved to Elk Grove, she basically became part of our immediate family. We took her on many vacations with us, had her for dinner a few times a week, mowed her lawn weekly, and just generally had her around. What a blessing. My mom was the person I called when Lindsay had colic, refused to sleep at night, and I was beyond tired and stressed. I'll never forget one night she came through the door at 9 p.m., took the baby, and said, go to bed. I knew my baby was safe, loved, and wouldn't be crying all night. Then she lived with us for a few months after we had Megan. She needed ankle surgery, and I had a new baby. The only solution was for her dog, and her cat to move in. What a blessing that was for me. I will never forget, one night I was up feeding Megan, and when I finished, I heard my mom whisper from her bedroom, bring her here. I took Megan to the bedroom, and my mom laid her on her bed next to her and told me to go back to bed. What a blessing. You're killing me, Mom. When I went back to work, I had all the guilt of a working mom, but she said, I'll watch them. What a blessing. I was so fortunate to work part-time, and it became routine for me to work in the girls' classrooms 1 day a week for the morning, and then my mom and I would go shopping and have lunch together every single week. What a blessing. Once, years later, when she was in the assisted living facility, she was distressed because she thought she was bothering me and taking too much of my time. I told her to never say that again because I owed her more than I could ever give. She had not only been a wonderful mom to my siblings and I, but she had cared for my children. Their lives were so enriched by her presence. And when my children had children, I again got to see her pour her love into them. I am so thankful that she was able to see them and be a part of each of their little lives, even for just a short time. She loved them, and they loved her. What a blessing. So I guess the answer to my grandson's question is my mother, despite not physically present, is still my mom. The blessing of having her as my mom and having her entwined through my life will live on. When I was helping Lindsay pack up her classroom a week ago, a friend of mine reminded me how my mom would come to my school and help me, and that I had the most organized rainbow order desk, paper drawers, and my desk was always the most organized because of her. So I believe her legacy does live on in me, my siblings, her grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Our lives move forward, and with all the blessings she poured into each of us, she lives on. She was a blessing. So I'm going to read mine now. It was hard to find, I'm winging this part, which is very dangerous territory, but it's hard to find the words to describe someone like her. And I just hope that we all do her justice, I guess. I did my best. I really debated whether I wanted to say anything at all. I have a habit of making jokes at the worst times when I feel uncomfortable, and I wasn't sure how appropriate that would be given the situation. But then I remembered why we're here and who we're here for. And one of the things that I most vividly remember about her is her laugh. As I say that, I'm sure each of you can hear it too. It was loud and contagious, and her smile and her eyes would light up any room that she walked into. Grandma never minded a questionably placed joke, and so I decided that I could risk it. As my mom said/wrote, my grandma watched me a lot during my childhood, and she was a huge part of my life. I am so grateful that I had that time with her, and I get to keep those memories with me. While losing her is hard for me, I think initially the hardest part was knowing that my kids are still so young. They are 1 and 4. I'm so thankful that they met her and that she got to hold them and she got to know them. But they won't remember her. And for a while, I was really sad for them. But Grandma lived such a big life, and she was, without question, the kindest and most loving person that I have ever known and probably ever will know. A life like that doesn't just go away. Not only does she live on in heaven, pain-free, and with so many people that she loved so dearly, but she lives on in all of us. My kids won't ever eat her patented mini bagels with soft-boiled egg, or her instant pudding with the Cool Whip from the fancy goblets that, I don't know what they were, but they were like goblets with a stem. But because of her, I can make that for them, minus the goblets, because I don't know what those are. They might not remember her laugh, but I can make sure that our home is filled with the love and laughter I always felt with her. They won't remember her goofy dogs, but we have our own goofy dog, and I'm sure my grandma would have loved her. They might not, or they don't get to have her as the most amazing grandma like I did. But then I see how my mom looks at them and how she treats them, and I know they're covered there too. Pieces of grandma live on in all of us, and we are all better people for knowing her. Thank you for being here and for being part of her life.
I was doing pretty well there. So my name's Steven. I married one of Evie's granddaughters, one of Kathy's daughters. And one of the great joys of my life is joining this family. I got a bunch of extra cousins aunts and uncles, parents, and a grandma who my kids got to know as Graham. So, that wasn't smart. Now I get to share some reflections from Sue. It's June 12th, 2 days before Mom's memorial service. It's blustery and raining outside in my town, Truckee. I've done just about everything possible to avoid writing and, of course, thinking about what I wanted to say today. So many memories and special times to share. Of course, I can't share everything. There's just not enough time. So I'll start by saying that Mom, or Grams as the family calls her, is the best. I don't know how, without going on for a couple of hours, to describe what she means to me and what kind of amazing mother, grandmother, and person she was. I will say that she was one of the most loving, kind, caring, accepting, patient people I have ever known. Mom was the first person I went to with anything and everything. From my shy childhood days up until the time I saw her 2 weeks before she fell, she was my support, my confidant, my role model, my cheerleader, and my friend. Of course, it became harder for her as she aged, but I always felt those things up until the end. She had a way of making me feel special. Mom had an amazing positive spirit that was contagious. She was quick to laugh and first to comment. She was personable, and she was a talker. She put family first, but also tried hard to make time for herself. She was a friend, a swimmer, a TOPS member, a churchgoer, and so much more. She was courageous, smart, kind, loving, and patient. People liked being around her and liked talking to her. She lived in a lot of pain, but rarely complained and never gave up, not until the very end. She was one of my biggest fans. I'll never forget the time I found out I was pregnant. My mom was at our house, and I was happy, but also worried and scared. She was so supportive, calm, and practical about it all. She made it sound like it was going to be okay, and it was. But that was nothing compared to the time when I found out I was having twins. I was a wreck. I was happy but scared. I remember when I called her, there wasn't anything she couldn't answer for me. All the advice, love, and support she shared with me was right. We were okay. It was crazy at first, but we were okay. Her wisdom and guidance has helped me through many tough times. One of those tough times was when I had to tell my husband that we were going to have 2 babies. We didn't know until after she passed that she had written a loving letter to Ron about being a parent. For some reason, she didn't give it to him while she was with us. The theme of the letter was about not losing yourself and the love of your wife while raising your children. She talked about her experience of having 4 kids, 2 that were born very close together, and how she could imagine what it's going to be like with twins. The letter was so gentle and kind and moving. She also talked about looking back at your life and not being able to imagine your life without them. She was right again. Mom was wise and smart. I'm so glad my sister handed this note to me while we were cleaning out her apartment. It was actually written on small scratch paper where she had started a grocery list. Mom came to our place in Truckee almost monthly for a long while after the boys were born, even during storms. I know it was exhausting for her, but she did it anyway, and I'm so glad she did. She was one of the most patient, loving people I have ever seen with a baby. One of the best. She could calm either one of them down, and if she had a hard time, she wouldn't give up. She would keep rocking, pacing, or singing You Are My Sunshine, Puff the Magic Dragon, and other songs until they eventually quieted. Those were some exhausting, tough days, but she continued to visit. That's how much she wanted to be a part of her grandchildren's lives. That's how selfless and giving she was. Mom was always so proud and would brag not only about us, but about her whole family. She loved us all so well. Mom and I would joke about her age later in her life, even up to the last good visit with her in early April. We would talk about how old she was, and she would tell me she never imagined she'd make it to 85. She also exclaimed that she couldn't believe all her children were in their 60s. I imagine she never really felt much past her 60s herself, although we could see the changes. Her outlook was always so positive, even though she suffered a lot of physical pain. She just couldn't believe she was that old. But what a blessing to my family and to the whole Scott family that she was with us as long as she was. To say I will miss her is an understatement. I am so thankful I was born into the family God chose for me, with the parents I had and the siblings I still have. I am one of the lucky ones. My mother and father didn't do everything right, but they sure did a lot right. I love you, Mom, and I will miss you terribly. but I'm so happy and blessed to have you as my mom, and I'm happy that you can now rest in peace and in no pain. You deserve it. Give Dad a big hug and a raspberry on his cheek for me.
Hi, I'm Heather. I'm Evie's first granddaughter. As the first grandchild on both sides, I've been ridiculously rich in grandparents. I knew Gram for 43 years, just over half her life. It's an honor to speak to you about her today. I'm exactly the age that Grandma was when I was born. That's of no real significance, yet it moves me to think about how much living and caretaking she'd already done by the time I was born. Evie Scott was a wonderful grandma. She had the softest lap, the warmest laugh, and endless patience for little kids. My fondest memories of being in church are when I'd lean into her side in the light of the stained glass windows, and I'd run my index finger along the seam of her polyester grandma pants. She'd sneak candy to me or a notepad when the sermon ran long so I could draw. Grandma's lap held so many. I remember climbing up to sit on one armrest opposite Melissa and leaning into Grandma's neck. As we aged out, the lap was always full of other cousins, then great-grandchildren, then pets. A full lap gave Grandma a full heart. Sick days at Grandma's house meant a cheese bagel from the toaster oven. She loved animals and babies, and she believed in answering children's questions, which is how I learned some new vocabulary one afternoon as she folded laundry and watched Cops. When Melissa and I were little, she'd put us down for a nap, and we'd wait about 15 minutes for her to fall asleep, and then we'd creep out front to watch Days of Our Lives while she snored. I watched a lot of interesting TV at Grandma's house, probably before I should. She was unconcerned. My memories of Grandma at Boyce Drive are memories of her surrounded by family. Moments when we all gathered in the shade that filtered through leaves of big trees. The home felt gigantic to me, the kind of place where everyone could fit, including a host of mysterious cousins once removed. I was small enough to feel free to roam, to run down the hallway, to read books in a bedroom, or to explore out by the back fence. I remember tragedy there, ambulances and grief I was too young to understand, but also family chatter, barbecues, celebrations, the whine of the ice cream maker out back with its salty runoff, homemade vanilla ice cream with miniature chocolate chips, angel food cake, teasing and laughter, and telling the story of the time that Grandma tried to jump up and touch the ceiling, Christmas trees, and a Santa rug. Grandma Evie was happiest with her family, or when she was sitting on the deck of the cabin listening to the roar of the American River. We both knew the secret. We were a little closer to God and to Grandpa when we were there. Graham's house was a safe space for all of her grandkids. For about a year, Eric and I lived across the street, and she lovingly reported our comings and goings to the entire family. It was a privilege to be the subject of her watch, and I treasure those years when I could just walk over to see her. Grandma liked to have a handle on birthdays and grades and ages. She wanted to confirm each family member's place in time. Now, what grade is Addie? She'd ask. How old is Henry now? Then the conversation could commence. I know it troubled her in the last decade not to have those facts within easy reach, but I appreciated that she kept trying. She asked even when the details were hard for her to retain. It was an act of love. Grandma didn't like silence, so she would often carry the entire conversation herself. She could talk. But that puts people at ease. Didn't have a lot to talk about that day? No worries. Grandma would talk and even interrupt herself enough for two. Grandma Evie's love was not tough. It wasn't conditional or transactional or competitive. She didn't care about having the best things or about trying to take advantage of anyone. Even though her life had been touched by adversity, she loved. It was the kind of love that Paul refers to in 1 Corinthians: patient, kind, contented, quiet, humble, gentle, forgiving, joyful, and enduring. Grandma's favorite thing was us. I can still hear her calling my name down the hallway. I know if she was sitting here in a pew today, she'd be crying as we talked about her, right? She didn't want to fuss. But she'd be so proud of everything that we've each become, and she'd be so fulfilled just to be here with her family. Graham will be with me every day, in my memories, but also in the unruly cowlicks in my head. Whenever I check my hair in the mirror, I see her running a comb through her curly locks. Through her bangs and her thick curls. She was the framed picture of grandkids in the hallway, the tub of mentholatum on the nightstand, the vibrant muumuu, the caddy of necessities next to the recliner, and the basket of toys for the grandkids in the closet. She had long, graceful fingers, and she wrote in elegant cursive that slanted gently to the right. She called every dog and cat he. When she'd yell for any grandchild, she'd start with the oldest and work her way down. All of us were Melindsay. Her life was difficult. She was a young mom to 4 kids. She lost Grandpa Don very early, and her health plagued her for decades. But she knew joy, and she taught it to all of us. I miss her so much.
Hi, I'm Josh, and this is Zach. We are Grandma Evie's youngest grandchildren. Oh boy, and we just wanted to share a little bit about how we knew her and how she fit into our lives. And when we were trying to think of words to describe Grandma Evie, the first one that came up was caring. And we realized that that's a very easy thing you can say about somebody, but she truly embodied it. She always told us she would stick around until we graduated high school. And she did that. And we feel so blessed to have had somebody in our lives who cared that much about us that our achievements and our success would be their milestone. We knew Grandma Evie during the later part of her life, and for us, she was always just the perfect example of a sweet, innocent old lady. I remember one instance, she was up visiting our house in Truckee, and I was sitting with her on the deck, and out in the sun, she saw me raise a straw to my mouth, and she just looked at me and said, "Smoking's bad for you." And what she didn't realize was I was shooting spitballs off the deck. But regardless, she was able to make me reconsider my behavior in a very gentle way, and that's how she was. She was gentle. I don't think she had a mean bone in her body. And later in her life, when I was in high school, and this I believe was after she had fallen, I just remember we were visiting her in Sacramento, and this is one memory I have with her. I felt bad because I didn't want her to feel like she was a burden. Our family was stressed, so I did something that completely contradicted my teenage boy nature, and I wrote my grandmother a letter. And I remember I put that letter under her pillow so that she would find it before anybody else. And of course, I was mortified because it was sappy and embarrassing. And so the next day, I went to go try to find it, and of course, it was gone. And I felt my heart drop because I don't remember what all it said. I think to this day, she's probably the only one who read that letter. And I just remember looking through the door of her bedroom, and I saw her sitting in the living room, and she just kind of smiled at me with that sweet smile she had. And she said, "I got your letter." It was, it was very sweet, and I like to think that Grandma played it cool. But that's just who she was to me. She was a very sweet presence in my life, and I honestly don't think anybody could have asked for a better grandparent. Thank you.
Not to follow there, but I didn't actually prepare anything. I figured, like Grandma, I'd just say what comes to mind. When I was little, I used to ask my mom what Grandma did for a living. I said, "What did she do?" And she'd tell me, "Oh, she's a mother to 4." And being little, I said, No, I know she's a mom, but what does she do?" And it took me a long time to realize that my mom wasn't talking about her job or what she did for a living. It's who she was. Even at the end, when she wasn't conscious, the last time I saw her, I knew she was a mother figure to all of us, and she lives on through our memories and through us. I see a lot of her and a lot of us. And whether it was when I was little, she used to slip me $5 bills and chocolate, and she'd always tell me, "Don't tell your parents." She'd say, I have chocolate hidden in my room, and she'd tell me her stash. She'd say, "Please don't tell my children." I don't know how many of you remember, but I always saw her rub her legs like this, and she'd do this a lot. And I was actually relieved one day when I looked over and I was at home and I saw my mom doing the same, because I knew that my grandma was living on through her, and it made me excited that that my mom's gonna be like her. And as my brother mentioned, she once promised us that she'd be there for our high school graduation. And we didn't believe her, but she was standing there, and fortunately she was there for my college graduation as well. And I'm really blessed to have that. And I look forward to someday my kids meeting my mom, because I know that she'll be a lot like Evie was to us. And you guys have probably heard me crying in the corner. I'm a crier, and Evie's always made me embrace that, and she's always made me happy for who I am. So I thank you all for coming today, and thank you for all the kind words.
I think we've been privileged to some of the finest eulogizing that I've ever witnessed. Thank you. 2 weeks ago, as the family gathered in preparation for today, I asked those present if they had but one word to describe Virginia, what would it be? And here were those one words: family, patience, humble, great mother-in-law, giving, Christ-like, angel, role model, lived her faith, never swore, best friend, caring, family, and love. Now we have some pictures of her life.
Moon River, wider than a mile, I'm crossing you in style someday. Oh, dream maker, you heartbreaker, wherever you're going, I'm going your way. Two drifters off to see the world. There's such a lot of world to see. We're after the same rainbow's end, waiting round the bend, my huckleberry friend, Moon River and me. Old dream maker, you heartbreaker, wherever you're going, I'm going your way. Two drifters off to see the world, there's such a lot of world to see. We're after that same rainbow's end, waiting round the bend, my huckleberry friend, Moon River and me. Moon River, wider than a mile, I'm crossing you in style someday. Old dream maker, you heartbreaker, wherever you're going, I'm going your way.
You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. The other night, dear, as I lay sleeping, I dreamed I held you in my arms. When I awoke, dear, I was mistaken, and I hung my head and cried. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. The other night, dear, as I lay sleeping, I dreamed I held you in my arms. When I awoke, dear, I was mistaken, and I hung my head and cried. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. The other night, dear, as I lay sleeping, I dreamed I held you in my arms.
Our closing hymn is Amazing Grace, and the words are on. Our benediction is the final blessing. I would ask you to stand if you're able, please. Let us pray. Lord, ultimately all of life comes from you and returns to you. As first you gave Virginia to us, so now we give her back to you. Receive her into the arms of your mercy. Raise her up with all your people. Receive us also and raise us into a new life. Help us to love and serve you in this world, that we may enter into your joy in the world to come. As we go forth, O Lord, bless us and keep us. O Lord, make your face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. O Lord, lift up your countenance upon us and give us your peace now and forevermore. Amen. The family has prepared a reception a time to continue to share stories and memories of Virginia, continue that eulogizing. We're going to dismiss informally. It's just right out the back doors.